Hello everyone, welcome to another video. If you are new to my channel, please remember to subscribe, like, share, and comment. Also ensure that you turn on your notification bell to be notified as soon as I upload a video. Our focus for this video is going to be on relations, function, and graphs. But we're specifically going to zoom in on relations, right? There are some key terms that I want you to pay attention to, which are mapping, domain, range, codomain, relations, function. So these terms, you should be able to define them, right? And you should be able to understand them. So as I use them, you know exactly what I am talking about. So what is a domain? Domain are the x elements on the Cartesian plane, right? What are range? Range or codomain are the y elements on the Cartesian plane. Now another word for range is what we call codomain. Another word for codomain is what we call the range. Another term for range is what we call the output. Another term for domain is what we call the input. Elements of the domain normally come first and the range are stated second. All right? Mapping is the relation between two sets of objects, right? So one set of object is being mapped onto another set of object. What is a relation? From a mathematical perspective, a relation is defined as a set of ordered pairs that obeys a particular rule. A relation between two sets is the collection of ordered pairs containing one object from each set. If the object X is from the first set and the object Y is from the second set, then the objects are said to be related if the ordered pair X, Y is in the relation. Representing relation. A relation can be represented in different ways, such as 1, using a mapping diagram, 2, as coordinates, 3, on a Cartesian plane. So here, I have the representation of a mapping diagram. So my first diagram here, as you can see, the relation is X is mapped onto 3X. So this arrow means mapped onto. So X is mapped onto 3X. Now the first set of values is what we refer to as the domain or the inputs. Note that the domain is associated with the X values, right? Now the second set of values is what we call the range or the outputs, and the output is associated with the Y values. Now, as you can see, we have 2 is directly mapped onto 6, 5 is mapped onto 15, and 10 is mapped onto 30. From this mapping diagram, we can determine the relation. If you look closely at the values in the range, which are 6, 15, 30, and compare it with the values in the domain, then you would realize that each range value is 3 times the X value. So 6 is 3 times as large as 2, 15 is 3 times as large as 5, and 30 is 3 times as large as 10. Now, these values, we can represent them as coordinates. So 2 is mapped onto 6. As coordinate, it would be 2, 6, where 2 is the x coordinate and 6 is the y coordinate. 5 mapped onto 15 can be represented as coordinate, which is 5, 15. And 10 mapped onto 30 can be represented as coordinate, which is 10, 30. Alright? Note that these coordinates can be represented on a Cartesian plane. So these coordinates have been plotted on a plane and it results in a straight line, which is a linear function. Alright? So if you notice here, let's just take, for example, 2, 6. Relative to the origin, this is saying that we must make 2 movements to the right and then 6 movements up. Note the difference in scale. On the y-axis, we are counting by 2, and on the x-axis, we are going up by 1. So from the origin, we must go 1, 2, and then 6 up, so it would be 2, 4, 6. So it will take us to this point here. All right? Types of relations. There are 4 types of relations, which are one-to-one relation, one-to-many relation, many-to-one relation, and many-to-many relation. So here, the first diagram that I have is an example of a one-to-one relation. If you look closely enough, you can see that 4 is mapped onto 2, and 9 is mapped onto 3, 16 is mapped onto 4, and 25 is mapped onto 5. So you have one element in the domain is mapped onto one element in the codomain. Where you have this scenario, this is an example of a one-to-one relation. And the second diagram that I have here, you have one element in the domain is mapped onto 3 elements in the range. Now you can see that B is mapped onto E, B is also mapped onto F, and B is also mapped onto H. Where you have this situation, this is an example of a one-to-many relation. If you look closely down here at my third diagram, if you look into the domain, you notice that you will have 3 elements in the domain mapped onto 1 element in the codomain. So in other words, you have more than 1 values in the domain being mapped onto 1 element in the codomain. Where this situation, when you have this situation, this is an example of a many-to-one relation. Many-to-many relation, which is my 4th diagram here. Note here you have B is mapped onto E, B is also mapped onto H, and you have C mapped onto E. So where you have more than 1 element in the domain is mapped onto more than 1 or the same elements in the codomain, this is an example of a many-to-many relation. In order to ensure that you fully understand these kind of relation, I am now going to zoom in on each of them one by one. So one-to-one relation. A one-to-one relation is one in which one element from the domain is mapped onto one and only one element in the range. For example, in a school database, each student has only one student ID, and each student ID is assigned to only one person. That's a real life example there. So as you can see here, this diagram is demonstrating a one-to-one relation where you have one element in the domain mapped onto one element in the range. And for the second one, we have one element, right, in the domain is also mapped onto one element in the range. Let's look at the other one. Many-to-one relation. A many-to-one relation is one in which many elements from the domain is mapped onto one and only one element in the range. So here, if you look closely at my first diagram here, you have +2 and -2 being mapped onto one element in the range, which is 4. Also, +3 and -3 mapped onto one element in the range, which is 9. So this is an example of a many-to-one relation. All right? And as you look closely here, you have more than one pets have been mapped onto one owners. All right? Let's look at the others. One-to-many relation. A one-to-many relation is one in which one element in the domain is mapped onto more than one element in the range. For example, each customer can have many sales orders. So here on my diagram, you note that in the domain, which is the X values in this case, we have 1 mapping onto +1 and also -1. We have 4 mapping onto +2 and also -2. And we have 9 mapping onto +3 and -3. So this is an example of a one-to-many relation. Many-to-many relation. A many-to-many relation is one in which many elements in the domain is mapped onto many elements in the range. For example, a many-to-many relation exists between customers and products. Customers can purchase various products, and products can be purchased by many customers. And as you can see from my diagram here, which demonstrates a many-to-many relation, you have 1 is mapped onto 2, 4, and 6. 3 is mapped onto 2, 4, and 6. And 5 is mapped onto 2, 4, and 6. So this is an example of a many-to-many relation. In order to test your understanding of this concept, here I have an example that I want you to try. So at this moment, you're going to pause the video and complete this example. So it says, draw a relation diagram for the relation defined as follows. Relation x is mapped onto 2x plus 1, and the domain values are -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 3. When you are finished, you need to state the type of relation obtained, whether it is a one-to-one mapping, a one-to-many mapping, a many-to-one mapping, or a many-to-many mapping. And please leave your answer in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and do enjoy the rest of your day.